Oh, hey, what's happening there, YouTube? It's Brian House here for Housework, and today we are going to be tuning our 2x72 belt grinder. Now, if you're not familiar with the Revolution 2x72 belt grinder project, I'll put a link down in the description so you can go back and follow along with the project. But ultimately what it is a very nice, heavy industrial belt grinder that the idea was conceptualized right here on YouTube, and then you all gave me your feedback, and then we've now brought it all the way up from a concept to a prototype, many different generations, and then ultimately led it to manufacture. If you'd like to find out more about the Revolution 2x72 belt grinder project, you can go to my website, housemade.us, and see everything we have available. We have kits, parts, pieces, and plans. Now, this video is going to seem a little bit Revolution specific, but it will apply to just about any 2x72 belt grinder on the planet, okay? So I encourage you to watch the video all the way through. There's a lot of details. Just sit down, watch it, and soak in the concepts that we're talking about here, because the mechanics, the physics, and everything that's going to be talked about here, the concepts, are going to apply to just about any belt grinder, okay? And then once we're done with the video and you've watched it all the way through, you can, jump into your build and actually start tweaking it and tuning it. I do believe that's the best way to achieve success. Now, a few of the things that we're going to talk about in this are probably going to blow your mind a little bit about how simple it is to actually get a belt grinder to track forward and reverse. I get a lot of questions about that. Why would you want to run your belt grinder in reverse? There's other videos out there on that. I like to run my grinder in reverse for putting edges on blades, sharpening, working with wood handles. There's all kinds of reasons why you'd want to do that, and I love having that flexibility. Anyway, why don't we just jump right in? I'm gonna just go through some of the tools and things that we need to get set up, and then we're gonna get this belt grinder tuned and ready for work. All right, let's discuss what we need as far as tools. We're gonna need some box end wrenches. I have a 9/16, a 7/8, and a 3/4. We're gonna need the Allen wrench that you'll use to loosen up your drive wheel. In my case, it's a 3mm. A 5/16 Allen wrench. In my case, I'm using a ratchet style. Believe it or not, this is like one of my most favorite tools in the entire workshop, is my little set of these guys. I got them on Amazon. All of these tools, by the way, you can find on my in my Amazon's links below in the description. But yeah, I use these all the time. A speed square is really useful for a couple of different applications in this. It's 100% not necessary, but I do like having one around. And then also a 4-foot level. The belt matters. When you actually start looking at belts, you'll find that a lot of them are very different, and a lot of them don't track the same way. So I like to use a good newer belt. This is an 80 grit ceramic belt. You don't want to use like a 36 grit. You don't want to use a really low grit belt because they're a lot thicker. In this case, you want something that's flexible. This is 80 grit with a like a canvas back to it. That's a really nice belt to use in this process, because it's going to kind of be somewhere in the middle of all the different belts that you have. You will find that when you switch from belt to belt, a majority of your belts will not track the same. So this just gives you a good index when it comes to the belts. Also, let's go over some nomenclature. These are going to be considered the Platen wheels. These two wheels right here, they're 2" by 2". This is a tracking wheel. I like to run the 4" wheel. Some people run a 3" wheel. I've not seen a difference between the two sizes. I just think 4" looks better. And then the drive wheel. In this particular case, we're using a 5" drive wheel. So let's talk about axis real quick. When we swing this wheel out, that's going to be the primary axis, in and out. And then when we grab the entire thing and twist, that's going to be our secondary axis. So primary, secondary. One thing to double check is to ensure that your tracking arm is tight. Now you can see here I've got wobble back and forth, and that's no good. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this up. And the proper tension on this is somewhere in between, nice and tight where it can't move left to right, but it also needs to be able to bounce on the spring. So you don't want it to be locked down to the point where it can't bounce. So let's just There we go. So we got no left to right movement, but we've got bounce and return. One of the things I cannot stress enough is, regardless of what build you have, if your wheels are not somewhat aligned, meaning in a straight line, if you can think of this belt just like resting on a table, what would it look like? And you want those wheels to kind of match that profile. If you've got one wheel that's 3/8 of an inch that way, or 12 millimeters that way, or whatever, and one wheel going this way, you're never going to be able to make it track. Now, when you build the Revolution, I give you a spacer to go here, and that pushes the D plate out. And then all of the hardware and all of the little cut pieces that we put in here for this platen make this belt just want to ride in one straight line. So keep that in mind. If you don't have that, you're going to want to fix that first, and then start moving towards getting your grinder to track forward and reverse. Okay, so the first actual step is going to be indexing the drive wheel against the bottom platen wheel. And if you've got your drive wheel locked down, take your Allen wrench, loosen it, and then grab your 4-foot level here. And then what we're looking for is a straight line against this drive wheel. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be close, and you can kind of get an eyeball look at this thing as you're doing it. You'll notice, well, wherever I have this thing seated, it wants to live in a specific spot. So I'm just going to push it in till I feel that that level is resting on this drive wheel nice and flush. And then it should be lined up with the outer edge of that bottom platen wheel. All right. So as I bring it down, it looks pretty close. I might pull this out just a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. Take our Allen wrench, tighten that down. Okay, the next step is you're going to want to loosen this just slightly so that you can turn on the secondary axis, which is like this. And you're going to want to grab just a small speed square. You're going to want to try to square this up as much as you can to the tooling arm. This is really just for indexing, okay? This isn't going to be probably where this thing lives, but what we're trying to achieve here is as straight as possible, 90 degrees off of the tracking arm. That way everything should line up down the way. Now if it doesn't, no big deal. We're going to take it apart and make it right. All right, tighten that down just slightly. One final adjustment is we want this wheel to be as parallel to the base plate as much as possible. So just, you can kind of eyeball it. You can also use your top platen wheel as an index as well. And this will all start to make sense in just a couple minutes. Looks good. Okay, so now we've got all our wheels indexed. Let's throw a belt on it. I'm just going to roll it by hand, and we're going to see how well it tracks across the front of the platen and across the top of this tracking wheel here. Okay, you can see here that we are tracking too far to the right, which is that way. The belt should be riding right along this leading edge out here, and it's definitely not doing that in forward. Now your first instinct is going to be to grab the primary axis and adjust it. Don't do that. You actually want to adjust the secondary axis first. So we're going to take this, we're going to loosen this top bolt just ever so slightly, enough to where the mechanism stays put even with belt tension on it, but we're able to rotate the entire axis. Now, because the belt is traveling too far that way, we are going to twist the mechanism towards the center of the grinder, or to my left. So just a slight adjustment. We're talking less than a millimeter, maybe even half of a millimeter. And then we're going to tighten that back down. We're going to just roll this and see what adjustment that made. All right, not very much. Let's do a little bit more. We're going to loosen this up just a little bit more. Another small adjustment. Oh, now you can see. Look at that. It's traveling closer to this edge. Maybe just a ever so slightly more. Just a smidge. Tighten that down. Oh baby, look at that. Now you can see the belt is riding right on the center of the tracking wheel. That is exactly where we want this belt riding, okay? And we've done that only with the secondary axis, only with the twisting and turning, not the primary knob, not this one, okay? We've achieved that now. I feel good about that. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this bolt down and call that good. All right, so let's kick the machine on and forward. We're gonna go really nice and slow. Let's kick it on and forward and see what she does. Oh, you can see, look at that. It went right back to where it wanted to go. So let's take this, let's loosen it back up, and let's twist it back in. Let's turn it on. Oh, maybe we went a little too far. Slight adjustment. Back. Turn it on. Oh, she's a fiddly one, this one. Now we want it to go just ever so slightly that way. Back and forth, just ever so slightly. Getting very close. You can see how these minute adjustments, how they can be ever so small and make a huge difference. All right. Oh man, that's right there. I like it. Looking down the belt, I can see it's traveling nice and evenly. Not quite perfect on the tracking wheel, but that's okay. I like that it's traveling across the platen nice and straight. We're going to call that good for now. Okay, so let's take another look at forward. Nice and slow, you know, we're not going crazy. You can see that the drive wheel is doing its job. The belt is running right on there, nice and centered. And this wheel looks pretty good. With all of our adjustments, I can see that we're meeting our platen right here on the platen face, and the belt is running over that platen all the way down nice and parallel. Okay, that's my goal. Now the other caveat to this is, can we get it to go in reverse with very little adjustment? At this point, probably not, but let's kick it on and see where we're at. Nice and slow. Oh, look at that. We're riding just a little bit to the left of the edge of this platen, about 1/8 of an inch. Now this might blow your mind a little bit, but instead of adjusting the tracking wheel, I'm actually going to adjust this bottom axle on this bottom platen wheel. And all I'm doing here is I'm just turning it. And the axle is turning itself all the way through. You can see the nut on the other side is moving as well. That's because there's just an ever so slight difference there on that angle, the way that that axle is sitting inside of the D-plate. Look at how much I can get that to maneuver if I just rotate this. About right there is our sweet spot, and then we'll slightly adjust the primary tracking to bring it over. Look at that, running in reverse. Now the reason why this matters is because this bottom platen wheel has now become the tracking wheel. If you think about it in terms of, if this was our tracking wheel in forward, it's because the drive wheel, which is pushing the belt across and around, this is the first wheel it hits, the tracking wheel moving forward. And this is what's setting its axes. Now in reverse, it's the converse, right? It's going to hit this wheel first. The drive is actually pushing it, the force, and this wheel is now setting the axes. So if you can adjust this wheel slightly, just turning it, not tightening or loosening, but just spinning the axle in there, it might give you exactly what you need to run your machine perfectly in reverse. All right, so here's something that's bothering me. The belt is running a little bit too far out for my liking on this drive wheel. So let's take the belt off and let's slide that drive wheel on the axle just a little bit out. What that's going to do is, if your drive wheel is crowned, it's going to center that crowning on the belt itself. Could come out a little further. There we go. Now let's see if sliding that drive wheel in and out on the shaft made any difference on the tracking. It did. It moved the belt out that way. So let's grab our Allen wrench. Let's twist our secondary axis. Ever so slightly. Tighten it down. Pulls everything in. A little too much. So we're going to loosen this. We're going to bring this back. Oh yeah. I like where this is headed. You can see we're just kind of getting into the minutia of this thing. Oh yeah, we're really close now, within a 1/16 of an inch on the face. So adjusting the primary axis will get us where we need to go. I'm going to go ahead and tighten down the secondary axis. And let's just go ahead and throw it in reverse, see where we're at. That's it. We are really close. Now we can grab our 7/8 inch wrench and we can adjust. I love this stuff. That's it. No complaints there. Right on the money. One little trick here, once you have everything dialed in where you like it, I like to just make a nice little index line using a Sharpie marker, right? And that kind of gives me that spot. And then I'll make a kind of a vertical and a notch line right there. That way, if anything ever gets kicked out or moved, or I'm adjusting for a different belt and I need to know where my center line axis is, index is, then I can use that mark. Now I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Brian, why do you call this the secondary axis when you're turning it left to right and you're doing a whole lot of that, and this the primary axis? The reason is in this video we're setting it up and you're going to be doing a whole lot more fine-tuning adjustment to the secondary axis, but once that adjustment is done, it's done. You don't really need to go back and adjust this at any point. That's the reason why I had you put that mark in the front there with a Sharpie marker, because that's going to be your index for pretty much every tracking position you're going to need moving forward. Now when you swap belts, you move forward and reverse, you're going to use this knob to actually do that work. It's going to swing things in and out. But the reality is we want this as level as possible and as straight as possible in all conditions, running exactly this way in the secondary axis first, and then we do our fine tuning with the primary adjuster. And this is what we're just going to be using moving forward. One thing I like to do at the end of my grinding day is to pop the belt free, release the tension from the belt itself. And the reason is because the more pressure you put on that belt for the longer period of time, the less life that belt is going to have. So, you know, if you want to get longer belt life out of them, you can just pop that tensioner, and it will actually just hang on the machine until you're ready to grind again. And also, if you don't set up your machine quite right, and let's just say your tracking is all wonky, and every time you use your machine, that belt is twisted and pulled in all those directions, that also, no matter how good the tracking looks going across the face of the platen, that also reduces the life of that belt, okay? It's just gonna stretch it and warp it, and then every single use, the thing is gonna have more wibble wobble, and you know, eventually you're just gonna end up having to toss it, or that seam is gonna pop off and fly and smack you in the face, which is never a fun time. Don't ask how I know that. One other thing I'd like to mention is it's also really important to like and subscribe and comment on my videos. YouTube's algorithm is kind of funky like that, so if you got something out of today's video, please hit that thumbs up. Please hit that subscribe button and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about the video, if anything at all, or just, hey, I appreciate the good info. That really does help, and it really makes my videos kind of get pushed out to the masses, and that changes how all my business works and everything else. So that's a huge, huge help. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. I truly appreciate you. It's been really fun hanging out in my workshop and studio. As always, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. You can go to the website. There's a contact form at housemade.us. There's Patreon. There's Buy Me a Coffee. There's my Amazon links down below. All of those are great ways to support everything I have going on right here in my workshop and studio. As always, guys, I hope to see you on the next video. My name is Brian House, and this has been Housework.